Now welcome to another edition of Let's Talk Some Star Wars, where this time we'll be taking a look at the results of the poll that asked you what rating or how many stars would you give the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. We'll then be comparing those results to all the other Disney Plus series we've got so far, as well as reading and responding to some of your comments. And we do have a special guest this week. My wife will be mainly reading the comments for me, and she's kind of gone through and picked them out this time instead of me doing that, so I'll be a little less prepared, shall we say, for whatever you all have to say about this series. But before we get to that, let's now see how you all judged the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. And so it looks like 7% of voters said it was amazing and gave it 5 stars. 30% gave it 4 stars and thought it was good. 34% then went with 3 stars, thinking it to be pretty average, which left 19% to give it only 2 stars, thinking it not very good, and a final 10% to give it only 1 star, calling it terrible. And so when we do all the math here, that means the Obi-Wan Kenobi series ends up with an average score of 3.05 stars, which actually puts it into last place when looking at all the Disney Plus series to come out so far, even below the Book of Boba Fett, which is a little surprising to me. I mean, not that I think the Obi-Wan Kenobi series was phenomenal or anything like that, but I actually would rate it higher than Book of Boba Fett.
Do you think this could have anything to do with fans' expectations?
I do, actually. I do think a lot of fans... you're taking Obi-Wan and Vader and you're making a series. Expectations should be high with those characters, right? But turns out it is the last play show. And, not exactly here, but there is a trend of... They've been steadily going downhill. Season 2 of Mandalorian is actually ahead of Season 1, which obviously, they are flipped in terms of release, but steady decline when it comes to these shows.
It'll be interesting to see where Andor ends up on this chart eventually.
Very interesting to see how Andor goes. It's the show I don't think anybody has expectations for, or few people have expectations for, so maybe that'll be...
Well, a trend on your chart seems to be Mandalorian is doing very well. Mandalorian was a character they invented for Disney Plus. He has no canon that they can mess up, no expectations to subvert or destroy. Bad Batch is not a hugely well-known group.
No, not at all. They premiered very shortly before then in Season 7 of Clone Wars.
And their story has been told in chronological order, so it's not like they're messing up a lot.
Well, yeah, that's the problem with Kenobi and Vader, right? We have an endpoint. We know how their stories end. So it's very difficult to... And we have their beginning, too. So it's always difficult to put something in the middle of those two.
So that could explain why those are higher on the list, whereas Boba Fett and Obi-Wan are both legacy characters. Boba Fett may have gotten a boost from having the Mandalorian show up, and Luke, and...
Yeah, absolutely. The best episodes, as the joke goes, of the Book of Boba Fett didn't have Boba Fett in them.
Handled, I think, Luke very well.
Yes, I think so. A lot of people have the issue with the choice, but I don't so much. I think that's actually in character, that Luke is now giving a choice to the Jedi instead of just kind of expecting them to follow. But that's a whole other debate, and we should probably move on to the comments now.
Absolutely.
But not before, once again, just quickly saying thank you to everyone who does vote, comment, and watch these or any of my videos. Also, a big, big thank you to everyone who supports this channel, or my other channel, the one I do with my wife, on Patreon. And so now let's begin with the top-rated comment.
First, I'll apologize if I pronounce anybody's names wrong. Top comment this time comes to us from A. Ferkley. Overall, I enjoyed it. I agree with the people who say we should hold Disney to a higher standard, though. It could have been much better.
No, I absolutely agree with that. I say all the time, you can enjoy whatever you want, but that doesn't mean you can't expect a little bit more. I always, hear that, your expectations are too high, you want the show to be this and that, and yeah, my expectations are pretty high. Like I said before, these are the 2 biggest characters in Star Wars, arguably. You should expect them to deliver something pretty fantastic, right? The problem with the series for me is they just get treated like, you're using them as these assets that Disney has in order to lure in fans and make money. It wasn't about telling the best story, it was getting people to watch your show, and that's the problem for me. Yes, I understand, I've said it a million times, Disney wants to make money, completely fine with that. I understand that's how business works. But for me, you would think the best way for your business to work would be to deliver the absolute best product you can to your customers so that they not only are extremely happy, but want to continue to come back and want to continue to support you and essentially give you their money.
Okay, moving on. Our next comment is from Adam Williams. Ewan McGregor's face carried the show for me. By that I mean his acting was phenomenal and sold me on the story. Unfortunately, it's a story that shouldn't have happened and made little sense in the broader scheme of things. The story was fine, if way too contrived, and I enjoyed it for what it was. Crucially, it was better than the Book of Boba Fett, so it has at least had that going for it.
Yeah, I mean, Ewan McGregor are phenomenal, especially in that pretty much the big, climactic battle, when he and Vader are talking to each other. And Ewan's acting was phenomenal. Like, his emotion is amazing. And I thought Hayden, for the little he got to do, he's in prosthetics, he's got to have his faces covered. Hayden delivered as well. I mean, it really makes me sad that they didn't give us more flashbacks. Everybody loved the flashback. I thought the flashback in itself was fantastic. I don't know that it was too overly relevant. Like, yeah, Anakin is kind of, obsessed with winning and, being the best. And so it kind of reiterated that. And I guess if you're not someone who knows them very well, that can work for you, that you don't really know who these characters are. So you're realizing, oh, Anakin is just, dead set and focused on winning all the time. So it works in that capacity, but there was so much more you feel like they could have done with the flashbacks. You just kind of feel like they wasted Hayden. I mean, he basically came back for that one flashback sequence and then to be in the suit and deliver a couple lines when he should have been maybe not quite as focal point as Ewan and Obi-Wan, but certainly he should have been a bigger part of the series, I think.
Next comment from Simon Yesh. This felt too average for Star Wars, considering the characters in it. Out of all the projects Lucasfilm had announced, this was the one I had hoped would raise the bar for Disney Star Wars. Sadly, it lowered the bar, then raised it only back to its original place. The show had some great moments, but they were only that. Just moments among a mess of a limited series that should have been either a film or not attempted at all. Ewan and Hayden were great, most of the cast was solid, the direction, cinematography, and execution is where, in my honest opinion, they dropped the ball.
Oh, I agree. The cinematography, it did feel very small and contained. It didn't feel like this, larger Star Wars. Yeah, and that's the problem with the volume sometimes. Like, I think it's incredible technology, and it certainly cheapens the budget for them. But sometimes I really do feel like you can kind of feel that they're on this smaller, it doesn't quite give that expansive feeling. I don't know, maybe I'm the only one who feels that way. But I mean, the first line there, it basically sums it up, right?
Absolutely.
Considering who these characters are, and that's what we've been saying, considering the two characters, we should expect great things. We should have expected Lucasfilm under Disney's finest effort to date, right? This should have been the series we were all like, oh, that was phenomenal. Every ounce of effort and every ounce of thought and passion and love they could pump into this thing, they did. Instead, it just feels like, they kind of half-assed it because they knew people were going to watch it regardless.
Next comment comes from Lady of Coruscant. I wrote this comment on your episode 6 review, but I wanted to put my thoughts again here. The series was overall okay, but not great. I was disappointed that they focused so much on Leia for all 6 episodes, instead of fleshing out other characters like Reva, Kenobi, and Vader Anakin. I wish we saw more of these 3 characters. I feel like Reva was seriously underdeveloped and her motivations didn't make any sense. Why did she want to kill Luke? Did I miss something? Is it because he's Vader's son, or did she want to get back at Kenobi? Also, why did Vader order the Star Destroyer to follow Kenobi when he could have followed him on his own ship? There are so many little things that I just didn't get. Despite all of this, I really loved the duel between Anakin, Vader, and Obi-Wan. It was amazing to hear James Earl Jones and Hayden Christensen's voices blended together. I give this series a 5.5 out of 10.
Yeah, I talked about this kind of in a video the other day. What you really want out of a series is where the good guys and the bad guys are at their best, right? They're competent, they're intelligent, they're making the right moves, and one side just happens to, to get the edge or outsmart the other, and they get the victory. In this, it's like, she's bringing up a lot of great questions here, like why didn't the Star Destroyer launch some ships, or go after one with TIE fighters, go after the other with, the Star Destroyer? Why doesn't Obi-Wan delete the message from Bail Organa? What does Reva exactly want there at the end? She just conveniently finds something. It's like, I'm going to go to Tatooine because I'm somehow going to piece everything together that this is, I think she thinks it's Vader's kid. It's not really clear exactly what she thinks. She kind of implies she wants vengeance against Vader by killing this child, even though she has no way of knowing if Vader even knows the child exists, or if it's maybe Obi-Wan's kid, which would also make sense to want him hidden by Obi-Wan, right? So that's kind of the problem. It's not a matter of, Obi-Wan barely got outsmarted, Vader, he barely defeated the Empire, if you will, or got away. It's just both sides were kind of dumb, and then it ends with Obi-Wan leaving Vader alive, and you're just left like, what was the point of all this? And same with Reva. She goes to Tatooine to kill Luke for reasons.
What did you think about the part where she talked about how they focused so much on Leia and didn't really flesh out characters like Reva, Kenobi, Vader, Anakin?
No, I agree. Like I've said before in videos, like Leia was the whole focal point of the series. She was the catalyst. She was she was that which got everything in motion and then kept it in motion, kept dragging Kenobi along. And it wasn't really about Leia per se, but she is definitely the string that made everything go. She's she's the cog in the whole story. And you could have actually tried to make it about Reva if you really wanted to. I don't think the Obi-Wan Kenobi series should have been about Reva, but if you wanted to do a story about her, there's stuff there, right? There's potential there. Moses Ingram proved in the final 2 episodes she can act, after a lot of people complained, she wasn't so good in the earlier ones, but there was an idea for a character there, maybe not one that's all that original, considering we see very similar in Jedi Fallen Order, but no, there was a lot of potential here that it just feels just kind of squandered all around.
All right, let's move on to the next comment. Emperor Cubone. There were parts I loved, those parts being about Kenobi fulfilling the mission we all expected of him. It's just a shame the majority of the series shoved all of that to the side for random characters we don't know, and creating more holes in the plot than Kayani Mundi had after Order 66. The Lars family really worked for me. The petulant Inquisitor, whose portrayal would have been subpar even for a high school play, did not. By the 4th episode, my eyes were strained with the amount of rolling due to the writer's constant insistence that Reva always came out on top, and it only got worse. But I will admit to being moved at seeing Vader under the mask, even though we already saw it in Rebels, and the return of certain masters on both sides. So I guess average. Not fully as bad as the sequels, but not even as good as the movies it followed.
Definitely not. It was average, and it definitely had its moments here and there. There are these really good moments, but they're just surrounded by these contrivances to get to them. It's I've said it before. I feel like when they wrote this series, and granted, on the other channel we talked a little about the writing process behind it, that it started out as a movie. Another writer came on and kind of turned it into a series, and then yet another writer came on and kind of adjusted that. So you can kind of see the original idea for the movie in there, and it gets bloated. You have these key moments that, a movie is going to be more structured and more condensed, obviously, than a 6-part series. So you can kind of see the beats of the movie, but then you draw them out, and you have this just filler in there that exists to turn it into a series. And they really wanted to keep these beats, despite the fact that they were adding more characters, adding just more stuff in general. And you can really see that if they chopped this up and did it right, there probably is a pretty decent story here. Maybe still breaks canon. I'm not arguing, this is not going to conflict with all that, but you could have at least made a really, really good story, discounting what it does for the canon. Instead, it gets drawn out into this just kind of mess.
Next comment comes from KS. This is a difficult question for me. I feel like I just watched my favorite sports team win a game, but I know they're not playing their best and could have scored 10 extra points if they'd been performing at the level I know they're capable of. Because of this, I'm giving it a 3 out of 5. There were moments and scenes that I genuinely liked and that felt like Star Wars, but there were also significant missed opportunities and odd story choices that prevented it from reaching the A quality I know it could have been.
Yeah, I love my sports analogies in videos. I do them all the time. And that's kind of how I feel. Like, you play to the level of your competition sometimes. And I think the quote-unquote competition in this case was just a series that featured a rematch of the century that made a lot of people, oh, did you see how awesome that battle was? Did you see that one moment? Because that's what I see out of most people who seem to have really enjoyed this. They're like, oh, that was so cool to see that Hayden and, you in flashback. Oh, that Vader first Reva fight was so cool. I don't really see people saying, my God, that story was a masterpiece. Like, the whole story was just so, riveting, and I was on the edge of my seat, and I didn't know what was going to happen next. And you don't see that. It's always like, oh, that was so cool to see that. Oh, that was great to have Ewan back, or great to have Hayden back. Nobody that I really see is saying how this was just a masterful piece of storytelling.
Next comment is from AB the Dragon. Personally, I thought it was pretty good. There were some serious standouts. The opening scene showing Order 66 again, brilliant. The horrific and commanding presence of Vader, awesome. That flashback showing how Obi-Wan used one of his old student's greatest flaws against him, poetic. Granted, there are some things I wasn't a fan of, like the chase scenes, a few moments that made me go, yeah, right, and in general, some of the episodes just didn't grab my attention during a lot of the runtime, but ultimately it wasn't bad. My conclusion, enjoyable series, though not the most rewatchable for me.
Well, yeah, I mean, not to pick on this comment, but anything, but this is kind of what I was just talking about, like citing like these moments in the series, like so cool to have that. That was excellently done. That was well done. But there's very few people that, again, I see arguing like, oh, the series itself, the story itself was this well-constructed masterpiece. But no, I mean, I agree. There are great moments in there. There are cool things in there I really liked. But overall, an average series that is not very rewatchable. I mean, I'm not on the edge of my seat like, oh, I can't wait to watch that again. Whereas with, say The Mandalorian season 1 and 2, I have watched them, I watched them when they were coming out. I would watch them usually twice to do reviews, and I've watched them again since. I don't really see myself watching Kenobi again anytime soon.
Next comment is from Andrew Lai. Before seeing everyone else's comments, I honestly had a great time with the show. It's nowhere perfect, but the world is terrible enough for me to agonize over fine details of a fictional universe. I understand lore is important to many, but to me, I enjoy Star Wars for its characters and immersing in a fantasy world, not for immaculate historical/lore consistency and flawless logic. I can see how others don't enjoy it as much, but coming out of the show, I am a happy fan indeed. To elaborate a bit more on what I liked, I thought Obi-Wan's arc from a traumatized and fearful hermit back to a Jedi again was beautiful. The bits with the path were melancholic, yet hopeful. Looking past the questionable CGI, Vader has tons of chilling, powerful moments, and I loved how they put the Anakin and Vader ESP in episode 5-6. Leia was of course adorable and heartwarming, and Reva also got a surprisingly well done arc. It's somewhere between a low 5 and a high 4 out of 5 for me.
Well, I mean, for me, and someone who does cite that they enjoyed the story, which is, like I said, a rarity, but okay, so there certainly are some that did enjoy the story. But for me, I mean, saying how, I don't want to agonize over the details of a fictional universe when our own real world has its flaws. For me, it's kind of the opposite. Like, I don't, yes, I like to discuss the real world. Obviously, I like to bring up real world topics, and I think that is extremely important, more important than Star Wars. But I do like that you can, when people are in the right mindset, because some people do take this a little too seriously with Star Wars, I like being able to debate the ins and outs of Star Wars. That's something I really enjoy. I like seeing a very consistent, universe that does feel like an alternate or different history or an actual history of a different galaxy. That's an aspect I really enjoy out of it, is the consistency, discussing it, kind of debating it, and looking for the intricacies. So, I mean, it's basically to each their own kind of thing here. So if you want to just watch it and not worry so much about the consistency aspect, that's great. But of course, there are those who, that's what we watch it for. That's one of the things we watch it for. We really like the fact that it is this one universe or one galaxy and kind of this continuous story.
Last comment, H8 Night Reviews. I enjoyed the show, but the complete lack of tension harmed the experience. Kenobi, Vader, the Organas, the Lars, Luke and Leia, the Inquisitors, we know their fates. Therefore, they were never in true danger.
Yeah, that's another problem. Most of the characters in here we knew, they couldn't die or how the story would work out for them. And so the few characters that were new, Tala being a perfect example, you kind of felt if anybody's going to die, if they were going to try to go for like an emotional or impactful death, these are the characters they would, of course, use. I was waiting the whole series for Tala to die, and then she kind of has this odd death where she has a thermal detonator, and instead of throwing it earlier, she decides to basically blow herself up with it, along with some Imperials, of course. So that is one of the biggest problems. You have that problem all the time with prequels. You know how it's going to end. And with this one, it also has a prequel before it. So it's sandwiched in between these two very fixed points in the timeline. So you have very little wiggle room, and the more you wiggle, the more people are going to notice the inconsistencies, and that's what happens here. Well, I guess that's all we got for you this time, so now it's your turn to take to the comments below and tell us what you thought of the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, or tell us what you think of what we thought of the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, or anyone who left a comment on this video. And so, take to the comments below, let's talk some Star Wars, and until next time, thanks for watching.